I think it's 5 minutes over the time. I think it is time to start. Do we have Mr. Mahendra Kumar on the call? Dr. Raul, you are ready, right?
Yes, I am ready, but I was just saying like Induji is also there, Dr. Indu.
Yes, yes.
So
I'm just waiting for her. Yeah.
yeah, so I think she'll go first, right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, fine.
Yeah. Only with the time constraints, like 7 minutes past, and I do not see her on the call 8. I'm just trying to see what next we can do.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
because everyone's time is so critical here. But just let's give 1 more minute. I just pinged her.
Cool. Okay, no problem. Sure.
So can you share the joining URL? Some people are asking for the URL so that they can directly click on that.
Sure. Let me try to get that one. And I got it. Let me share it. It's there on here.
Yeah, it's there.
It's here too on the chat box here.
Mhm.
Do we have Dr. Indu 8? I don't see her 8 on the call. Yeah, I think given the time constraints and we are past like close to 10 minutes over the time, we will start the event. So welcome and Jai Bhim everyone on this Mahaparinirvan Day celebration or reflection day. This is a very important day in the history, as we know. Uh, we are the follower of Dr. Ambedkar. Dr. Ambedkar has given whatever he could in the best way and uplifted millions of untouchables. We all know about it. Now, the question always comes on to us that as a follower, what is our role? What is our responsibility? How we are playing that one? How we actively working for the mission? Whatever the left our mission of Dr. Ambedkar is there. And all these questions, while we brainstorm on that, it is important to understand a different perspective from the research scholars. And this is an event to reflect on that journey, whatever we have. It is an event to think about what exactly we can achieve in the future and the way we can handle the situation in different aspect. So you might be aware that Tolstoy had said, right? How many, how much distance you walk is not important. In which direction you walk, that is most important. And we can generalize this statement into the variety of spheres, like how much food you eat doesn't matter. What kind of quality of food you eat matters, right? How many books you read doesn't matter, but what kind of book you read and how much you understand from that book matters. And similarly, those who work for the Dr. Ambedkar's mission, they know it, that just saying that, okay, I'm working for the mission, I'm doing something, that something word is basically very bad. We have to do something concretely. The concrete thing, the concrete action will pay for the next generation and will basically help the next generation to realize that what legacy we are leaving it. And with that respect, today's talk is very concise, okay, to reflect on how we can carry the same legacy to the next level. I see Dr. Indu is there. If not, then I would basically invite our main speaker, Dr. Rahul, who is the founder president of All India Independent Scheduled Caste Association. He has completed his master degree from TIS, Tata Institute of Social Science. And he also founded the community-based organizations. He has been a hardcore activist from his childhood. He grew up in slum area, and he is continuously working for the mission since at least 10 to 15 years. He's also known for his writing in various media portals. We might have seen him on various media channels, TV channels. Presently, he's working towards forming the National Autonomous Movement of Scheduled Castes in order to fight for socio-economic rights of the scheduled caste community. I welcome him on this talk series and would like to request him to go ahead and share his thoughts. Mr. Rahul.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I'm really glad and happy to be part of this conversation, this event, remembering Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar. So how much time I have? How much time you're granting?
25 minutes.
25
and
minutes.
Yeah, and if you can enable the camera, that will be great. It is getting lively recorded on the YouTube.
Okay, so you can't start your video because the host has stopped it. So you need to allow my video to be started.
Okay. All right. Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, now I guess you can see.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, is it fine? The screen is fine, right?
Yes.
So thank you very much once again. And yeah, so this particular talk, material in Ambedkar, as is also suggest that it goes little, or I'm trying to go little beyond this popular understanding on Babasaheb Ambedkar, which we generally see in the literature and also in the everyday discourses, specifically in scheduled caste community. So what you say, that something concrete, and this is what something concrete which I believe that I wanted to do, at least with the discourse around Babasaheb Ambedkar. So as we know, I don't see much distinction. Like before going directly to my talk, which I will be speaking on certain points, may not, create some, concrete comprehension maybe today, but to in future I might create a concrete base of what I'm going to speak. But I actually wanted to say that I don't see much distinction both in the activities and also in the discourse around Ambedkar. Like for instance, what I see in the local area, let's say from Islam or villages, the struggle for building the statues or or like celebrating events around Ambedkar. I see the same, if not the struggle, but the movement somehow at in the popular level reproduce the same activities, like for instance having Ambedkar statue and then making something big out of it. I don't, and especially and also in the literature, somehow in the post 90s I believe, where you see the emergence of Dalit literature in the form of autobiographies, or again some new poetry and all of that. I see this much celebration of subjectivity in the Dalit literature around Ambedkar, and therefore I don't see the concrete theoretical approach to see Ambedkar. There are few studies, but not many, or even to theorize what the Ambedkar works, or what we can say the Ambedkarism. there are some local books in Marathi which I have read. What is Ambedkarism, which are kind of new again, because let's not say that what they produce in the local level is something very noble. But yes, with that thought, I am trying to understand, what Baba Sahib actually, how one can understand Baba Sahib, through material lens, or I am trying to argue that how Baba Sahib also emphasize when he understood the society, or let's say, in his review article, where he reviewed the Bertrand Russell principle of reconstruction of a society, where I believe that he somehow coming very close to what we can say the materialism or the materialist. Not exactly what the Marx and the Angel carved out from the Hegel's dialectic interpretation of the history, but yes, very much close to understand how society progressed from one stage to another. So yes, as we know, for Marx and Angel, the change was inherent in the nature of material world, and therefore they, for them the events are very much important, for them, therefore this, like Hegel would argue that it's ideas, it's a spirit, it's a human, something divine power which takes a, which help the history to take its course. So idea itself change the history, change the course of time. Marx and Angel would argue, no, you need something, some, the material base to change it. Therefore, the events are very important. And here, Baba Sahib is very important. What he says, that the every society needs a force, the force to change the course of action, to change the course of history. And therefore, I am saying that Baba Sahib comes very close when it comes to understand the historical development of society. He is not some like a Hegel or other people who would say the ideas are much more important or the superior, or they themselves create the conflict and therefore change comes. And as I said, no, Marx said and Angel said, no, it's not the simply ideas which creates the conflict, but rather it's basically the events, and these events are inherent in the material, and therefore there is this constant material conflict, there is this constant dualism, there is this constant dialectics. And again, if you see, and I see that this very idea of force, which Baba Sahib refers in this review of reconstruction of society by Bertrand Russell, and again in Buddha or Karl Marx, and many of his several writings, he constantly refers this idea of force. Sadly, this force, the construction around force or a theoretical understanding around force, I don't see in Ambedkar's writing. They basically somehow create some passive understanding around Ambedkar, that okay, constitution is there, state is there, political party is there, giving vote is there, taking reservation is there. Simply these are this, let's say, the constructive notion around the reality, rather changing the reality with the force, right? And again, if one looks into the force here, one can say, becoming very politically correct, oh, when Ambedkar used the very idea of force, he did not say violence. No, he said violence, but the ends and the means need to be moralized, let's say in the Kantian sense. So again, if I go a little further and say, like, and this entire distinction I'm trying to carve out between, this, the difference between the materialism and the idealism. As I say, the materialism would look into the history through, or change in the history with the basic proposition of materialism, like, how the nature of reality changes. Like what we see is state that the matter is the primordial substance, the essence of reality. Everything comes from matter and its movement, and is based upon the matter. This is what generally we know that the materialism is, and again this we know the idealism. Now here I'm trying to pose, how we can understand the Ambedkar through materialists. Why I'm also arguing this. So just give me a second. There is some, yeah, yeah, yeah. So, like as I said, I quote Ambedkar here from the same. He says that it must be remembered by those. Okay, before quoting, let me just give some context. So, like, the listener will not have any confusion.
Sure.
some problem in my laptop, but I'm okay. Yeah. So as we know, Hegelian dialectics consider things in their movements and changes, interrelation and interaction. Everything is continual process of becoming and ceasing to be, in which nothing is permanent, but everything changes and is eventually superseded. All things contain contradictory side or aspect, whose tension or conflict is the driving force of change and not and eventually transform or dissolve them. But whereas Hegel saw the change and development as the expression of world spirit or idea, realizing itself in nature and in human society, for Marx and Engels, change was inherent in the nature of the material world. They therefore held that one could not, as Hegel tried, to deduce the actual course of events from any principle of dialectics. The principle, for Marx and Engels, the principle must be inferred from the events. Now, here you see, as I mentioned above also, what Baba Sahib says when it comes to the very idea of events or force, let's say, it must be remembered by those who are opposed to the force that without the use of it, all ideals will remain empty. So for Hegel, the ideas are important. What Baba Sahib is saying, who are opposed to force, that without the use of it, all ideals will remain empty, just as without some ideal or purpose, all activity will be no more than a mere fruitless fooling. So as we know, so this is what Baba Sahib is trying to say when he's trying to understand the course of history. As we know, the Marx propounded a doctrine of economic interpretation of history. This is what I'm quoting Baba Sahib. Baba Sahib says, Marx propounded the doctrine of the economic interpretation of the history. A great controversy has raised over its validity. To my mind, Marx propounded it not as so much as a doctrine, as a direction to the labor, that if a labor cares to make its economic interest paramount, as the owning classes do, history will be reflection of the economic facts of life and more than it has been. So now here he is basically scolding, and this is from Baba Sahib's speech, which was delivered at the concluding session of All India Trade Union Workers Study Camp held in Delhi from 8 to 17 September 1943. So here, when he's addressing the laborer, he's basically trying, he's scolding them. Scolding for saying that for all these years, rather believing the very idea of capturing the power by organizing the laborers, you are believing the stories of queen and the queen, the king and the queen. You are believing the stories of myths, which are basically have become the obstacle for you to capture this state power, which he mentioned very clearly. And therefore, I'm saying for Baba Sahib, this idealist notion of the history or reality becomes very secondary when it comes to understand the society. The way Marx saw or the Engels saw, the history as a conflict between two classes, he Baba Sahib again and again going into the past and saying that there was a class, the class of a Buddhist society, which he again in Who Were the Untouchable says that the very idea of untouchability came out of the contempt for the Buddhists. So when he referred the Buddhists, he did not refer them something as a people having a divine power, people who held no, simple people who believed in the idea of labor or who did not believe in the ritual duty. And against them, the Brahmin produced the contempt and they therefore produce the untouchability. This is what, and therefore for Baba Sahib, if the history here is also between the communities, between the classes. One is the Brahmin class, another is the, let's say, the ex-untouchable. And this is not simply about, and then he comes and he says that, how, like, even if one reads the Manusmriti very closely, Manusmriti gives a very minute prescription for individual to live everyday life. That how you will eat, what you will eat, what you will wear, even how you will reproduce, how you should have a sex, with whom you should have a sex. So this is a minute observation of a human community, to maintain the monopoly. Now here, when Baba Sahib also in his Mukti Kon Pate, the path to salvation, he says this battle both is spiritual and material. And later in his speech, he says this is basically the class war. This is a class struggle, right? He simply does not reduce it simply the problem of identity. Oh, for him, then the identity becomes kind of a secondary, but what becomes the primary, this class war, therefore the material war. Now, again, I'll go a little further and argue that, like for as Marx, there is this, conflict, dialectic, like, the property, private property and all of that. For Baba Sahib also, from that speech, I can quote, like, he is basically saying that, uh, for laborers, for labor, what is more important basically to develop this, the conception, the desire for power, and not just this trade unionism, or you form a trade union, then fight and and protest against the industries. No, he says you need to go beyond this and develop this very idea of, capturing the state power. So therefore, and therefore, again, when he refers the very idea of property, he simply, like, let's say, he's not someone who is against the historical development of the property, or, you want to manipulate the nature. And you can see, some of his work also in his life when he was a minister. He, unlike Gandhi or other so-called today's politically correct, the nature activist, he is someone who believed in the idea of constructing dam, but here when he's saying that you can manipulate the nature, and this is what, as Marx also would argue, that the human has an innate capacity to manipulate the nature and create, the resources for himself. Similarly, Baba Sahib is also saying the human also have ability and the desire to manipulate the nature, and therefore the property. And therefore Baba Sahib was not against to create the property or to generate the property, but here he's coming and saying, he is not having the problem with the property, but with the unequal distribution of it. For those who have none of it are prone to perpetrate more destruction. So now here Baba Sahib is saying, I am not against the property, but basically unequal distribution of power, property. Therefore, the equal distribution of property is very much important. Now, again, coming to the materialistic notion of understanding the history and society, when you understand the caste, how does he understand the caste? So in Annihilation of Caste, what he trying to argue, he says that the caste is a natural stratified system. And it's very interesting to see that, he's some, and there is this, let's say, not thin line, but there is, when it comes to understand materialism, one has to also understand what is naturalism. Now here Baba Sahib again and again using the word nature, that he's saying the caste is a natural system, saying that there are stratified society in the world based on the caste, or let's say based on the race, or even based on gender. Here he's saying this is not simply the caste is saying unnatural, specifically in the context of class, specifically in the context of the Western society. He's saying because here is not, as we know, he's saying it's not because the division of labor is there, it's a division of laborers, as we know. And now therefore he's again and again and coming and approaching to understand history, that the history came from the primitive to feudal, and from feudal to industrial society. This is, let's say, the normal, the course of history that we have witnessed, specifically in the Western context. In the context of India, he sees this natural development did not happen. That the human society have not transformed from the primitive, necessarily from primitive to the feudal, and from feudal to the industrial. You see, the glimpses of all the epoch in Indian society. Today also you can see. And this is something unnatural, because here still the human, and unlike Marx and Engels, what I believe, that Baba Sahib simply did not emphasize on the very idea of surplus labor. The surplus benefit. What Baba Sahib is saying, you have a surplus permanent labor here. Therefore, caste is unnatural. Therefore, there is less possibility that we see when he argues against the Communist Party of India and also against the trade union. What he sees again and again is trying to say that here you simply do not have the idea of labor, but what you see is the ritual duty. Oh, you are supposed to do this. Your Maha, your Matang, your Valmiki, you are supposed to do this because there is this idealistic notion. Now here, why I'm saying Baba Sahib was against the idealism and close to materialism, because as the idealist would argue that the society has changed because of the idea and the divine power and the spirit, Baba Sahib would say that the caste society also has been justified with this divine idea, because the Brahmin would argue that the caste system is divine, given by the Brahma. And here Baba Sahib is saying, no, this is basically not true. And therefore, you need a force to dismantle this. And he says that along with dismantling this legitimacy of Vedas by, discarding them, by burning them, he also says that once you discard the Manusmriti or Vedas, what happens? What is the next? And the next he comes and says that how there should be the democracy. And when he talks about democracy, he simply does not again make the democracy as a passive parliamentary democracy, where he also gives example from the different parliamentary democracy how they have failed completely. Where and then he goes into arguing that we need a social democracy. Now, when he talk about social democracy, again the social democracy is not simply the democracy of both the rulers and the ruling class. Here he makes the distinction very clear, and he argues that how the ruled, let's say the laboring classes, has to create their own consciousness, has to create their own understanding of their own reality. And again, when we talk about reality, he also go back to the history, saying that the all of us were the Buddhists, and the Brahmin and the, let's say now today's upper caste, they kind of colonized. He was the word used the word colonize, and very let's say very with lot of information citing from different Buddhist texts, he tries to conclude Buddha not someone as a spiritual philosopher, where now we see when someone say Buddha, the Buddha is sitting with closing eyes, all of that, look inside. I think in Buddha or Karl Marx and before and in one of his speech in Kathmandu also, he is very clear that what kind of Buddha he was. So there he talks about how if the Marx spoke about the private property, he also argues that how Buddha also spoke against the very concept of private property. So for him here, the Buddha is not simply the spiritual one who is looking inside, who is basically dealing mostly with the idea, but with the pain outside there, the suffering outside there. So this is what I believe, that the caste as a natural system. Therefore, why caste is a natural system? Because it has Indian society, because of caste, has not witnessed the natural development of a society, as I argued, from primitive to feudal, and from feudal to, let's say, the modern, the industrial society. And therefore, caste society becomes unnatural. And therefore, I'm saying the Ambedkar is very close to the materialism than any idealism. Now, how much time is left for me? Do we have a time?
Yeah, we do have another 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Okay, so I'll just conclude in 5 minutes. So this is what, like, if one has to talk in detail about how Ambedkar, if one has to theorize, the Ambedkar's materialism, it will definitely take a time, because he has not written, specifically, or let's say in one book about it. There are, one can find different references from different writing. He didn't, and we also know he was not privileged enough to sit and all the time to write. He had to even struggle to get a time to write for his community and about the society. So if you allow me, so then I'll go to the part of conclusion, and then I will see that how the today's popular Dalit discourse, through Dalit, let's say mostly English autobiographies, or let's say even films, or the other academic writing, I see that most of the Dalit writings are post-ideological. So for them, there is no one frame through which they want to argue against the caste. Rather, the self become very authentic. The self is very authentic. If Rahul Sompimple is arguing and saying, I have my own experience being Dalit, I become very authentic. And not just authentic, I also gain the authority. The authority to claim something. This has become the kind of, the fashion And this very idea of self, or let's say multiple self, I am this, I am that, this also, I am this also. So not just one identity, but I carry the multiple identity. This discourse, as we know, mostly produced by the American universities, mostly white liberals, which also goes with the the capitalist understanding of different realities, and and the different notion and the concept, which basically kind of covers the very evident class conflict, the evidence material reality that exists in the society. Rather, they bring this very concept of diversity and the intersectionality. So now there is not one oppressive, the ruling class. There are multiple realities, there are multiple rulers, there are multiple oppressors. There is not just one aspect that the working class has to fight. But now working class is burdened with so many identities and with so many fights that he has to fight, and there is no clear distinction. So similarly, what I see with the academic and this popular Dalit discourse, there are multiple identities. And one center point I see again and again in this post ideological, I argue, in this post ideological Dalit discourse, that the community, Dalit community, is the center for them to criminalize. I can only get the authenticity of my work when I somehow criticize also my community. I also say my community is patriarch. I also say, when I say my community also has a class behavior and all of that, then only I become the authentic in this post ideological discourse. So community is center, not as a not as the community which is struggling with the material reality and therefore has to stand against the the material class reality, but community as a source to get the authenticity, and this authenticity comes by criminalizing. So Dalit patriarchy, and then and Dalit heterosexuality and all of this. Rather, I see what Baba Sahib is most of his writing. What I see, he basically rather carries this very idea of universal self. Let's say the Kantian understanding, this objective universal self. Going and this very objective universal self also goes beyond this today's political correctness, which is mostly been colored by this the postmodern post ideological discourse around these identities and the self and all of that. So the common word that today's we also see the intersectionality, complicit, the multiple realities, pass the mic. So these mostly came from again again from the American universities and the civil society discourse. Pass the mic, like pass the mic, then what? Like what I say, that in this time, the ruling class cannot simply live just consuming the material. The ruling class as a human being also need to consume the guilt. So if you're an upper caste, I am Dalit, I will say, okay, you stop, let me speak, pass the mic. Now I have spoken, I have given you all abuse, you're upper caste, you're this. Now you're happy. Now you're happy because now I am oppressor, I have played my role. I have listened the oppressed. I have listened his galis. Now I am perfect, ethical human being in this material society. And therefore I argue, this goes very much with the capitalism. You cannot simply consume now. You cannot simply consume the material. You also have to consume the guilt. You also have to consume the shame. And this is very important for everyday living in the postmodern society, like let's say the American societies. And from that American societies, mostly the ideas has been copied in the lead discourse. There is, like let's say in the discourse around gender, class, and race, that has mostly been have been copied. But rather, what I see, Baba Sahib becoming very modernist. The kind of the references that he got very much come very like argue very much Kantian in understanding the self, saying that we need a universal self. So he's against also this local, or let's say he's against this local wisdom, like this paganism. Like Gandhi would argue, go back to the village, take the wisdom from this local. Baba Sahib said, no, this is this is the foolish idea. This local, they cannot give you wisdom. He said this is the local is all about caste, and therefore you have to go with this evolutionary approach. You need this universal truth. The truth that if you kill one human somewhere for a bali, if some community, some tribal community, or even some pagan community, or even some upper caste community give the sacrifice of a human being, if that is wrong somewhere in Marathwada, that should be also wrong somewhere in the New York. This is the universal truth that one has to carry. But the so-called this local wisdom, we know people will say, and also some of them also argued, oh, Baba Sahib used this word against tribe and this, that. Rather, I would say Baba Sahib wanted this universal self. And people can say, oh, but this universal self is very Western centric, very constructive in the nature. But I am saying there is hardly anything that the East in the recent time has produced that one can simply romanticize but cannot provide something in the concrete. This entire gang of post-colonialism and against this, let's say every time everything they would argue is a Eurocentric and all of that. But I'm saying if there is nothing Eurocentric, then you don't have anything concrete even to claim. Therefore, Baba Sahib was very clear when he argued against the Gandhi that you need a strong centralism, or let's say you need a strong federalism. That the locals will not rule directly, but you need something strong wisdom out from outside, which has a scientific temper. So I'm arguing that Baba Sahib was also against this peasant, or let's say this peasantry notion of reality, or this pagan understanding. Like we also still see, and many people even romanticize. So he was completely against it. Yeah. So last point I will read out, and then I'll just stop my my talk here. So why I'm saying this is kind of this self that generally we argue. This concept of self can be argued to be universal, as I am arguing, and composed of what the Alan Bourdieu refers to as multiple cities belonging to a set. So there is, although you can say there are different self, one on the line of caste, race, gender, ethnicity, all of that, but still there is this universal set of a self. More importantly, this self cannot be separated from surplus. What the Dalit writing is doing today, what I believe, is basically presenting the moral Dalit, the perfect self. If someone is Dalit, then you are perfect. You are someone who is basically polite, who is basically so nice, who does everything good. So either you are a perfect victim, you are getting beaten up, or either a perfect human being. You are not corrupt. This basically idea takes the basic human rights from you, the human basic instinct from you to become an evil. I am a human being. I have a desire. I can be anything. I can be good. I can be bad. I can be nasty. I can also do the conspiracy. And this is very important. These impulses, these desires are very important for any human community which wants to overcome their pain, right? But what happens in the today's Dalit literature, Dalit has been presented as a perfect self, right? There is no surplus, as if there is no surplus. I'm simply the perfect plain self. I just exist. I don't have desire. I don't have fantasy. I don't have perversion. No, and more than that, I'm not an evil. I'm simply a good human being. So it is not merely the part of, and in this sense, what I'm arguing, rather this surplus is very important. This surplus can be anything. This surplus encompasses passion, fantasy, perversion, kindness, fear, evil, so on and so forth. It is not merely the part of unconscious, as the Freud argued that this could be the part of the unconscious. No, but this is mostly expressed through the more conscious act. We know. After reading recent Dalit autobiographies that focus on what they call Dalit self, I wonder how Dalits can remain so untouched in their development of cognitive self with basic natural growth. The only self this autobiographer presents is the perfect self. They describe what the world has done wrong to them, but they don't dare to tell what they themselves may have done wrong to the others. Therefore, they have never done anything evil, but all evil has been done to them. Furthermore, through their autobiographical self, they prohibit Dalits of the most innate, immediate, basic human act, which is to acknowledge that Dalit too can be evil. They too can be violent, dominant, selfish, do the conspiracy. And I'm saying this is anti-human, unnatural, and this is unnatural. If you're not allowing them to have these feelings or these acts, then you are basically standing against their humanity. More specifically, the English version of Dalit self appears to be in tune with all the political correctness that exists in the popular discourse. We know that how patriarchy has done to same to the woman, where women can only be considered women when they're perfect, a good mother, a good wife, moral and passive towards lust and desire. outside of these boxes, they are labeled to be whore, evil, and so on. So far, these Dalit autobiographers only speak through their observer self, only looking outside, and they don't dare to touch their observed self. Therefore, by lamenting only in the victim stories of fashion with the political correctness, and I call this New English Dalit discourse a cheap fiction, pervert guide to understand reality. Thank you very much.
I think that is an excellent way to put up how the mental state of even Dalits has been evolved and how they have confined themselves to the thought process coming since last thousands of years. My favorite statement always is like Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar's statement is like, noble is your aim and glory to those who are devoting their life for the mission upliftment. And we are very thankful to have you as part of our community who strive all the time to do better and to work for the Ambedkar mission. So thank you so much, Dr. Rahul, for describing your perspectives and concisely pointing out how we should think out of the box. And we have a few questions. I would like to basically go through it. So we got the first question here. How do we understand the Ambedkarite identity? Is it an idea because of him emphasizing on the new Buddhism? Is it a program like Communist Manifesto? How can one proclaim the Ambedkarite identity? So it is all about identity. Should we jump into the Buddhism or some different identity? So the time respect, I would like to basically get a concise answer from you on this question.
Yeah. No, there's, if one understand, more than, understanding the Ambedkarism through Ambedkar, I believe that the Ambedkarism should be understood in the post-Ambedkarite time, that how community carried the Ambedkar. Because what they feel the need, what to take. So three major things, if one has to ask what is Ambedkarism, going again beyond the political correctness, religion conversion. And Babasaheb spoke about this. And when he spoke about the enlightened, let's say Prabuddha Bharat, simply does not mean that everybody is enlightened. It is about having the Buddhist majority. People may not agree with me, but that's what he referred the history, that the India was about having the Buddhist majority. And simply, and again, have this very concept of the, and then he comes to political party. He wants a political party and the leadership. And when he refers to leadership, he does not want this passive so-called giving chances to everybody. No, he wants, again, I would argue that he's someone who is basically, and let's say, Babasaheb was a man who began from the beginning. He began from the beginning everything. Therefore, he understood even the very idea of importance of leadership. Therefore, conversion, political party, and the social movement. These three aspects are the three core of Ambedkarism. Now, I'll just add one small point. And again, as I said, that he was against the local wisdom. Then what he was favoring? He was favoring this professionalism in the politics. And when I'm saying professionalism, you need the professional activist who understand things. You don't, after doing PhD, you don't go to slum and say, oh, you tell me your wisdom, I will be enlightened. No. You have done PhD. Now you're supposed to take the responsibility, get well trained, and lead the community. As everyone need a strong master, whether it's democracy or the autocracy. Community which is so oppressed, they really need a strong leader and strong leadership. That's what I believe that the Babasaheb represented himself, and also the post-Ambedkarite. And basically the post-Ambedkarite movement suffered from this, not having the strong master, not having the perfect idea that the Babasaheb said religious conversion means religious conversion to Buddhism. No Islam, no Christianity. Prabuddha Bharat means the majority of Buddhists. Again, otherwise, simply passive, no, we are not like Hinduadi, they have the Hindu Rashtra. No, you have a Buddhist idea of Buddhist Rashtra. That's what again and again in his writing is claiming. And he wrote about that, why conversion is important. Thank you very much. Perfect.
So I think this identity is definitely a very big topic. May not cover in this talk, but there is a question like, we need to understand the multiple identity fundamentals. That's one part. And today's Dalits are most sufferer of identity issues. So Dinesh Singh is asking that, can you throw some light on how should we align our identities, or where we should basically see as our identity?
No, I guess more than we are suffering from identity, rather I must say the discourse around us basically force us to suffer from the identities. And now this suffering from the identities has somehow itself become the objective reality, or let's say surplus in our life. If I only carry the heterosexual Dalit man, then I'm not simply, I don't have anything surplus to claim. Then I'm supposed to be claim my queerness. I'm supposed to claim my different identities. All of this, I'm saying one can be anything. One can have different kind of sexual identities, all of that. I am saying when it comes to Dalit, when you say Dalit, then what I'm trying to say is that for the majority of community who are living in villages and in city slums, the basic one common identity that they can come together is their material reality. Because majority of Dalits are suffering from the material inequality. You may be now Dalit queer, Dalit, gay, Dalit, feminist. You can anything, and therefore, if majority of them having the common, the material inequality, and therefore they can come together, and Baba Sahib is the solution for them. Who talks for the material equality, who talks about the very idea of force and the action, and the very idea of why you need to organize, why you need a leadership, why you need a political party, why you need a conversion. And therefore, for me, I believe that one can have a different self, as I argue, that you can be anything, but one identity that one has to be kept asserting is basically Ambedkarite, because majority of the, as I say, they have a shared material reality.
Thank you. So we have another question from Vaibhav Kishore, and he's saying that how can we convert unaware Bahujans into Ambedkarite? Of course, Bahujan is a very loaded term here. And what is your opinion on the inclusion of Dalit Muslims or Dalit Christians into the SC category?
I guess that is something very legal question. I haven't read much study on Dalit. Like, what I see, that I come from Islam where you see low Muslims and Dalits are there. I see that they do not suffer from entering into schools. If they want to go to madrasa, I don't see the Christian suffering from entering into the Christian, because in my city, the head of the big church the church in Nagpur is led by Dalits. So, and they are mostly holding the institutions and all of that. So I'm not saying, it should be for them. Now because I haven't studied much about Dalit Muslim and the Dalit Christian. So, but what I'm very clear on one thing, that I'm a Buddhist, and I believe that I believe in conversion into Buddhism, and I believe that there should be Buddhist conversion of Dalits. That on that position I'm very clear.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for your answer. There is one more question from Rahul. This is another Rahul Paul. And he's asking that what will be the measure suggested by Dr. Ambedkar to end the bonded labor or the contract labor, which will help marginalized communities the most in securing their income?
Now, he spoke about socialism, and in the context of past, as I said, he was not against the property of the capital. Rather, he sees part of the historical development. His entire protest against the Houthi system. He's also the protest against simply the bartering system in the caste system. Where Matang or Mahar, मेरे घर में काम कर ले तो अनाज लेके घर में चला. No, he said introduce the capital, introduce the money. This money and the capital is very important in the society. Unlike Gandhi, so he's someone who believes in this very idea of having, the capital, but the capital needs to be distributed equally. And moreover, he believed in the very idea of, industrialization of land, the nationalization of land. Like today people are asking, people are giving galis to China, but there is no farmer suicide in China. There is no farmer suicide in Russia, right? Your farmers, they commit suicide, even having some land. This is what Baba Sahib said, unless and until you do not have the nationalization of a land and government does not take care of it, you will not able to go further. So I believe that the bonded labor and the question of labor, Baba Sahib answered very well.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to add there for everyone's benefit that Dr. Ambedkar has started the movement in 1942. And since then, he said this, that he wants to make the nationalization of the land resources. And no party or no activist so far in our movement has taken that as an action and executed it so far. And that's why we are still in a very pathetic conditions. Going to the next question from Chardatta, there are distinct group among Ambedkarites. It starts from rich, poor, or regional basis. What are the different actions you suggest that can fill these differences?
No, who asked this question?
Charudatta Maste.
Where is he from?
He's from Nashik, right now in New York.
Okay, he's in New York. There is no different kind of Ambedkar. There may be different organization, but at the ground, if you do some good ethnography, you see the some homogeneity. There are, the beauty of Ambedkar movement, that you may see that there are different Ambedkar groups, maybe not liking each other, but one thing is very common, that they share the common understanding. So, for instance, if you go to Punjab also, if someone is Ambedkarite, he will say that the conversion into Buddhism is very important, and therefore now you have the Buddha Vihara in Punjab, the same like in the Maharashtra or UP somewhere, right? I have traveled almost all India, specifically among our community, and I have seen this thing. And my PhD is also on Dalit movement and leadership, so I know this thing. Yes, there are fractured Dalit organization, so there are no different kind of ambit. And the ground they are very clear. Conversion, Buddhist conversion is very important. Now, someone will say, "Oh, you are converted Buddhist, but you are still doing this, doing that." That is nonsense. Everybody, you need time to evolve. Like, this Dipankar Gupta and this Paik and all of these people, when this after conversion, this, they say that, even after conversion, Mahar converted into Buddhism, but they still practice Hinduism in their house. But they did not tell us that the people who practice Hinduism has also been considered as a deviant among Buddhist community. They do not keep their god, at front in the first room. Rather, they hide their god somewhere. So this force, this pressure has also been created, and this is not one day process. So what I'm trying to say here, there are not different form of Ambedkarism, or they may be different group. So they are very clear in the ground. Who are not clear are basically these new academic research scholars in different universities, which they live in the university, political correctness of, if any, identity will come, they want to adopt that identity into it. So anyway, yeah, thank you.
All right. I think with the time constraint, I will take two more last questions, and we will basically conclude the talk here. The first question is, how can we convert unaware Bahujans to Ambedkarite? I think Vaibhav is basically asking to re-clarify that one.
No, this is not about the individual task that you go to individual and convert. Again and again, I'm saying, let's see, one has to understand Baba Sahib, what, mostly to whom he is referring. And in what time he's, when he's talking about Marx, just check his references. And when he was there in the West, what kind of influences that he had. And when he came to India, and the reading that he's doing of even the Bhakti movement and all of that, or Buddha for that. What I'm trying to say here, he was a man who believed in the organized movement. The man who believed, like I said, in the professionalism in your movement. So if it is about converting some Bahujan or making him conscious about our movement, I'm saying it is, I mean, the change will occur. There are always the people who just give reaction. But the responsibility to change it, with people who are suffering. So these people will come along with this. Definitely, there are people who will come along with us with the passage of time, if our movement is very strong at the ground, if we have a strong leadership and a strong organization at the ground. That's what I'm saying.
Perfect. I think with the time constraint, the last question comes from Mahendra Survase. And the question is, isn't it now the time to redefine our identity as Dalit, as dependent of Samrata Shuka or Maurya, or creator of Nalanda University or Maharya battalions and a bunch of other things, right? So is it the time?
No, I believe that, what again I will say is, this is a high time, more than acting on something. This is a high time that we need to think. We are not thinking on a line specifically. I believe that, like when I'm saying that Baba Sahib claim for the universal truth or the identity. What I'm trying to say, if for the Maharashtrian scheduled caste, Buddhist, if Dalit is not the very close immediate identity which explains their reality, they may not they may not see the same thing with something happening in somewhere in Chhattisgarh or in Jharkhand or Bihar or Haryana, the scheduled caste who are living there. So definitely, I'm in a position that the community, but it's not just simply about identity. I'm saying the entire discourse around this Dalit discourse. I'm saying that has become passive. If you do not change this passive discourse, if you do not put force in this passive discourse, then even having so-called identity like Mulyavasi, like or let's say Ashoka identity or whatever, is not going to help us. Rather, what Baba Sahib is again and again saying that life, he says the life exists in the activity, but not in the passivity. Rather, what I argue that our discourse somehow become, let's say the passive, which is mostly coming from this post 90s, academic and the this and like these movies, all of that. So either you are so poor that you need some upper caste hero to save you, or either you are Dalit, you are so assertive that you do always moral, you're always moral. So as I argue that Dalit, your oppressor is not afraid of your morality, your oppressor is afraid of your ability. If he knows that you can too be able, then you will automatically get a new identity, and I believe that has to be done.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rahul. And
And I'll just add why, Kanshiram Saab, in the media discourse, when Kanshiram was doing politics, everyone labeled him as an immoral politician. Because if he promised BJP to form a government, he did not support them there. He said Lalji Tandon, then Lalji Tandon, Mayavati, all of this. He would not promise anyone that I am your permanent partner. He can change anytime. This very idea of being very selfish for a power, selfish for a community, that I can do anything spontaneously for my community and without bothering about with whom we are going, whether we are going with A party or B party, whether some liberal in Delhi arguing, oh, you have become communal because you joined hand with BJP, like that, okay? So, or rather saying some Dalit is basically in this one particular party, so he is this, he is that. So rather going beyond this morality, Dalit has a right to become, let's say, I'm arguing in the positive term that Dalit has to be also have a right to become a heavy. And the Kanshiram was a perfect example of it. Without bothering all the moralities, he said, I'll do whatever to do for my community. So he formed government with almost everyone.
So I think I have a question on that. Like when Dr. Ambedkar says that his political activism is based on morality, how do you consider one is not acting with the morality in the political area?
But what kind of morality? What did Baba Sahib say that the political? He rather, if you read his review on the of the Bertrand Russell, rather he's saying that the war, or let's say these acts are very important. Now let's say the like I guess if Baba Sahib would have allowed, and if he has seen this thing that the Kanshirams are forming government with BJP, also he would have supported it, saying that this is very important for a community there in the Uttar Pradesh, which does not even have a right to walk on the street with the dignity. The power is very important for them. He would not have listened the Delhi liberals sitting in somewhere or in JNU or somewhere in DU or some New York campus university. Oh, you form the government with the communal political party. No. So rather, that is a morality that we need to carve out our own morality. And this is the universal morality. And what is the Marx would argue for the universal morality for the laborer or for the working class, that they have to define their morality and not the ruling classes, because they are the one who have to define your morality. It's not about the fight between the Godse and a Gandhi. This is not a real fight. The fight is between the us and them. And when I'm saying them, everyone comes without having the distinction between the good or the bad Brahmin. So
Perfect,
I believe that.
perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much for describing things and answering my question too. And thank you, everyone. With the time constraints, we know that the identity question is very challenging and it will take a lot of time to understand it. We may not be able to cover in this talk, but in the future, whenever we will have more time, we will conduct a separate session for identity crisis and how we can handle it. With that, I sincerely thank you once again, Dr. Rahul, for coming forward and sharing your activism, sharing your thoughts, and giving something to ponder on. And on the occasion of Dr. Ambedkar's Mahaparinirvan Day, it is the time for us to ponder on how we have walked so far and how we would like to walk in the coming days or the coming years. So with that, thank you so much. And
I'm really glad.
I'm
happy to be part of this movement and conversation. Thank you
Perfect.
very much.
Perfect. Thank you. And to Beside this today's event, I would like to request our Ambedkar International Center's president, Mr. Ramkumar, to come forward and take it over. Mr. Ramkumar.
Yeah, Bhim, and thank you, Dr. Rahul, for sharing your thoughts. It was excellent talk, and we at AIC hope that the audience benefited and enriched their understanding about Baba Sahib's thoughts. You coming from very humble background, doing research at the grassroots level, and connecting your research with Baba Sahib's movement and presenting, to the audience here. We really appreciate it. It was a really excellent presentation, and I hope our audience, all the participants, liked it. In the beginning of the event, you mentioned that events are important to bring us together. Yeah, and we all agree. Sometimes we think that hey, we keep on having the event. I don't have time. It's like too much same thing every event, but we really need the events there. It brings us together. You also pointed out rightly that without implementing the ideas, they are useless. And yeah, that is also like something I will remember. We may talk many things if we don't implement, it's all useless there. And like Taksak mentioned, that is the Mahaparinirvan remembrance for the Baba Sahib. And that's there. We remember his legacy, his message, inspiration from his life, and how we move further from learning together. Yeah. So conversations are important, and it brings together. We
Yeah.
understand the root cause, and once we understand the root cause, only then we understand how to mitigate and how we fix the problems there. And we hope our audience liked it, so please attend our any further talks also. We will try our best to bring more scholars, maybe Dr. Rahul again on this forum.
Thank you. Really
Thank you
glad
very
and
much for
thank you
attending.
very much. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
Jai
you.
Hind.
Jai Hind.
Thank you, Mr. Ramkumar, for sharing your AIC-related vision, as well as the importance of having the communication and dialogues with the activist and the research scholar. Thank you so much. For everyone's benefit, Ambedkar International Center is a USA-based organization, and it has been trying to drive the Ambedkar movement from the USA, of course, working for the upliftment of our own people or the community people back in India. We have recently set up a new milestone in the history by inaugurating the tallest statue in the North America. You might have basically seen and witnessed it. AIC has multi-years plan, and AIC is planning to do many things that one could just think about Ambedkar activism. With that, I just wanted to inform everyone that tomorrow, Sunday evening, 5 o'clock PST time zone, that will be 6:30 morning IST. AIC is hosting a GBM meeting, which will be showcasing what AIC has achieved in 2023 and what is the exact plan in 2024. So please plan to spare some time, book your calendar, and please join tomorrow to understand more about the organizations and how we are working towards the Ambedkar mission. With that, I would like to conclude. We are like dot on time, exactly 1 hour, 60 minutes for this call. Thank you so much for everyone's attendance and joining us to understand the Ambedkar vision. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Yep.
Jai Hind.